Good morning. How are y'all doing? So I'm the first one. I'm setting the standard today. Hopefully it'll be a good standard. I'm excited being the first talk. That means I get to relax for the rest of PyCon. So I'm glad you're all here with me today. We'll get started. So my talk today is called Diving into the Deep End, a Python Journey in Water Management. For the past 21 years, I've been a U.S. Marine. I'm an officer, a chief warrant officer in the Marine Corps. So Python is not really like where I come from. It's not something that I have a lot of training in a traditional sense. The Marine Corps gave me a lot of discipline, opportunities for solving problems, all things that are good for coding, but again, I don't have any formal training in this. I have been the go-to guy for Excel and other technical things, though. My job is I'm a radar officer, so I'm responsible for maintenance, logistics, getting things done when things need to get done. About 6 years ago, my husband, who was just my fiance at the time, was working as a paralegal in Arizona when I was stationed there. His best friend was a lawyer, and their main customers are irrigation districts. If you're not familiar, most of the western United States, they manage their farms either by pumping water or by irrigation. So water comes from a reservoir, a river, a lake, and gets piped or run through surface canals, a whole network of canals from that source of water to the farm fields. So he was working as a paralegal at the law firm, and one of the district managers in Yuma, Arizona came by and said, hey, I've just taken over, and it turns out this entire utilities district is running everything on paper forms, paper and phone calls, which in 2019, 2020, that seems insane. Especially now, when I tell you there's still a lot of utilities districts, not just irrigation, but utility districts in the U.S. that are doing things on paper, phone call, Excel. It's pretty wild. So they asked me, can you help me build a better spreadsheet? That led to a unexpected journey that brought me here. 6-7 years ago, I could never have imagined that I'd be talking to folks at PyCon. This is amazing. But I don't want to just talk about the thing that I built. I also want to talk about the journey, what I faced along the way, how I got through things, and encourage you to build things as well. So again, doing things on paper, manually writing things out, doing calculations with a literal calculator, probably not the best way when we have some amazing tools these days. And there's real high stakes consequences when it comes to water management. These are resources that are becoming more and more at risk. Water is, if you've kept up with the news, it's pretty much constantly in the news about reservoirs drying up, droughts here and there. So this is important stuff that having the right tools to manage it is really critical. As I said, a better spreadsheet was not enough. It's not scalable. If you've ever dealt with, I'm sure probably everyone in this room has dealt with folks emailing spreadsheet from person to person to manage things, which is kind of insane. You can't do version management that way. You can't scale that in any way. There's complex business and logic rules that apply to any business or process, and those are really hard to build in or change in an Excel spreadsheet. Data integrity, a big one for Excel spreadsheets. That's always a challenge. You can't collaborate with folks. You can't see things in real time. It just was not the right tool. And the biggest issue, time boundaries. So when you're dealing with resource allocation, imagine, for instance, that a farmer wants to get water for 12 hours. So they're requesting from the irrigation district, hey, down the canal, send me 5 cubic feet per second for 12 hours. Well, that works perfect if it's, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., no problem. But as soon as they're starting at 8 p.m. and it's crossing to the next day, like how do you build that into a spreadsheet? Do you have different tabs for days, different tabs for a week? Well, what if they're requesting water and it starts at 8 p.m. on a Saturday and runs into Sunday? When it comes to reporting and calculations, it doesn't work very well. So I looked at what are the options out there. If I can't really build this in Excel, could I help them in another way? What tools are available? So I'm getting older. In the late 90s and early 2000s, I dabbled with PHP, Perl, some of those kinds of things. The very basics of JavaScript at the time were, not a great experience. But I hadn't really done much web stuff or much programming in general for at least a decade. So I started looking at what's available. And the two frameworks that I really kind of settled on as, hey, this would fit the bill and work really well were PHP and Laravel. I had worked with some PHP in the past, so maybe I can pick that up. The language changes over time, but it can't change that much, right? And then Python and Django. And I had wanted to learn Python for a long time, but sorry if I'm bringing up sore issues here. The Python version 2 versus Python version 3 thing kept me out of the game for years. I wanted to learn it long ago, and every time I would pick up a book or magazine, it would have at least a section about this debate. Do you want to use 2 or 3? I just didn't want to deal with that. But by the time I started building this tool, this service, that debate was mostly settled. Most of the packages were at least working on transitioning to Python 3, and so I felt safe moving in that direction. But probably the most important thing was in deciding to go with Python and Django was that I really felt that the community was the biggest part. The Python community seems to truly, genuinely care about important things like diversity and inclusion of people, things that make us as a community, as a society, stronger. And when I dealt with folks online in the Django and Python communities, I was just overwhelmed with how much help people were providing, how interested people were in the problems that I was trying to solve, and in sharing and communicating. It was just, it was very overwhelming. It was really a no-brainer after a short while to go with Python and Django. And that's not to disparage PHP and Laravel at all. Great frameworks and lots of good people working with those as well. I just can't say enough good stuff about the Python and Django side of things, though. So the messy middle of building a thing. I learned a lot in the process. On the, let me see here, next slide. So on the left side of the slide, you can see my initial crack at a set of Django models. Just a handful there. I think there was like 10 models, so about 10 database tables. And I was very naive. That solved the problem initially for the most basic stuff. But over the past 6 years, it's transitioned to what you see on the right, just a piece of the schema. There's now over 400 models. It's much bigger and more complex, and it's been a huge challenge trying to find ways to grow that as a sole developer. So the biggest technical challenge that I really faced was going from not knowing anything really about graph theory, about GIS, about agriculture, resource management. I really knew nothing about any of those domains, and if I were looking back or able to look forward from that point, I might not have even started this journey just knowing how much work was going to be involved to get to the point I am today. But I'm really glad that I did. So taking a water distribution system on a map and turning that into an actual graph in a database that you can work with using your web framework. It took me years to really get to the point I am now to understand how that could break down. So I tried things like modifying the GIS data itself to build a network. And you'll see there, you end up with lots of little things like that, where things don't quite align right. Building a network with the GIS data itself, it was not a great experience. My process was very fragile. I really struggled. I had to basically line everything up, tried to automate that. It wasn't great. The breakthrough for me was realizing that I could just build the graph structure, and that the GIS data, the coordinates, those lats and longs, all I really cared about for those was the visual representation. So once I built out a graph structure of that whole water distribution system, all those canals, I could just slap the line string for a canal, just basically slap that visual representation onto the model and not worry so much about making those perfectly line up. And then complexity. So I fell into the trap that I think many of us fall into of, hey, let's read about the coolest term or technology trend and try to apply that, because that's what real developers do, of course. So I looked at microservices were really popular at the time and thought that makes sense. That's what I should do. And so I split my at the time monolith into 3 different Git repositories. I will tell you, maybe that works for big FANG companies, but it doesn't work very well for a sole developer. Trying to manage one repository can be challenging enough. Trying to manage 3 and figure out how different databases now and different, like, it's not great. Don't just go with the trends. Go with what makes sense for you and keeps life easy. And I quickly learned my mistake after hours of building this stuff out, and went back to a monolith and couldn't be happier. Complexity is rarely better than just keeping things simple. But I didn't learn that lesson the first time. I also looked at front-end frameworks. Everything in my application up to that point had been with standard Django templates, and I realized, like, SPA is the new thing, right? You got to make everything dynamic. You got to load stuff dynamically, have transitions, do all this cool stuff. So I was looking at Vue, React, Angular, all sorts of cool things for the front end. And I started trying to implement those. And I went through a couple iterations of that before I realized, why am I putting myself through this pain? Like, the end customer doesn't care about it that much. They just want to be able to enter some data, view some schedules, get their work done. Around that time in 2019, 2020, HTMX was also coming out. And that let me apply some of those SPA-like transitions and dynamic content loading without having to really dig into JavaScript deeply. I'm not super strong with JavaScript, I'll admit it. And trying to learn Python and Django, and also trying to learn more in depth about JavaScript and whatever framework, that's an insane workload to put on yourself. And I'm glad that I went back from that. Keep things simple. Don't go with the flashiest stuff. Django templates are boring. Django's boring. That's fine. That gets things done. Boring is often the way to go. When it came to modeling the real world, as I mentioned, I didn't know anything about geographic information systems, about graph theory. I took a few college classes to kind of brush myself up on some of this stuff, but it took a lot of learning. Real water systems, they're networks, so really a directed acyclic graph. And when I started out, I knew I needed to learn a lot, so I built myself kind of a library of everything related to irrigation. resource distribution type stuff, policies from irrigation districts, anything that I could get my hands on. And it's now a file library of like 24 gigabytes. I probably have the world's largest irrigation library, which is, I don't know if that's something to be exciting about, but I like. And I'm a very visual person. So as a sole developer, like being able to document stuff is super important. I use oftentimes Draw.io for like just putting things, which is also diagrams.net, for just putting things really quickly onto screen. And then I really like Mermaid if you deal with Markdown formatting for documentation at all. Mermaid makes really nice graphs and diagrams that then you can keep in your code and update over time. But the code and learning this stuff and building, like that's really, in many ways, the easy part. It's straightforward. You can read a book and learn something. You can talk to somebody and learn something. It's the personal stuff, the life challenges that are oftentimes the bigger part of a journey. So some of those that I faced, imposter syndrome. I didn't know nothing when I started out. And you gotta get over that. Start anyway. If there's something that interests you, start building it. Worst case scenario, you're gonna waste a little time and you will have learned something and be a little better. Focus on the problem, not your qualifications. I still don't have a degree in hydrology or I don't have a farm, but I've kept building and improving. It's okay to be vulnerable. When I talk with a new irrigation district, because I am the sole developer and the managing director, I have to talk with these folks quite often, and I try to stay vulnerable and open. I don't know how you necessarily do things in your district. Here's how some of the districts I've worked with handle, say, resource allocation management or water rights. How do you guys do it? It's okay to be vulnerable and accept that you don't know something, and pretending you do will just make you look that much more ridiculous when you're found out. And then forcing functions. So I've given a few talks at DjangoCon, and again, this is my first one at PyCon. I encourage you all, when that call for participation comes out, submit a talk proposal. Whether it's something technical or just something that you've experienced, it's going to force you to kind of dig in and learn more about a topic so that you can present to the audience. And I've learned so much just through that process of giving talks and having to do the research ahead of time. And I would say now I am somewhat of an expert when it comes to modeling of water distribution systems and processes for a lot of those things, which I never would have been if I didn't start this journey. I also have ADHD, so prioritizing is not my strong suit. I cannot prioritize to save my life. I've been very fortunate that the Marine Corps has forced me into structure over the years. Otherwise, I don't know where I'd be today. Forgetfulness and time estimation, I think we all, if you've ever had to estimate a software project, I think everyone in this room struggles with that, but I think I take it to a new level. And so that can be really challenging when it comes to letting down somebody who you've told, I'm going to have this thing done next week, and you don't. Got to find coping mechanisms. So one thing that I tell myself, and I try to remind everyone on a regular basis, is that you're more than your level of productivity. At the end of the day, every one of us is going to leave whatever job we're at, whether that's retirement, getting fired, finding a new opportunity, or just dying. You're not going to be doing the thing you're doing now somewhere down the road. So don't get tied to that as being like the person you are. You're not your level of productivity. You're more than that. And balance. So I have essentially been for 6 years working 2 full-time jobs. It's really challenging oftentimes to do right by the Marine Corps, make sure that I am taking care of my Marines, not doing any of this business or work during those working hours. Balancing that with actually building the business and building the thing and talking to irrigation districts and their farmers, and then having a family, it's a lot of work. Sometimes you just have to accept that I can't do this thing right now, and I try to let the family win out when it comes to that. Try to be a good spouse. Try to be a good dad to my pup, Lady Duchess there. You got to recognize your limits. You can't do everything. So it's okay not to be on top of things all the time. And then tooling and sanity. So I was very fortunate that when I got started with Django, I stumbled across the best practices page that talks about how the capitalization of classes or functions or things like that should all be. And I just stuck with that. I see a lot of folks who get started with Python or programming in general who kind of just make up their own preferences, or they come from another language and they stick with that language's preferences. Using the best practices for the language or framework that you're trying to use right off the bat pays dividends. Suddenly you can read other people's code without having to reframe it or decipher what the capitalization is. You can look back at your old code and really quickly grok that stuff. So do yourself a favor, use the tools out there, use black or rough. Even if it doesn't look pretty to you, years from now when you look back at that code, because you're going to look at that code again and again and again, it's going to be familiar. It's going to be easier to read. And then document everything. I especially, again, as somebody with ADHD, my working memory is not always that great. If I don't write it down, it didn't happen. So I try to write down everything, knowing that as I'm working on something, I might get interrupted. If I can write down what I was doing or what I was thinking when I put down, my computer for the day, it's much easier to pick it up the next day. So document. And learn to explore, not just copy. So there are some other tools on the market that do the things that my service does, but not always in the same way. It was important to me to look at how they were doing things and what services they were offering, but not to just copy them, because you don't know what the constraints that they were dealing with. You don't know, from one irrigation district to another, for instance, but this applies to any business. The way this person or this organization does things is going to be different than the way this one does. So you don't know where they started out or why, and you don't know if their approach is really going to fit your long-term goals. Looking at the way others were doing things, but building it on my own, and not trying to copy them, really opened up opportunities for innovation in my own service. So starting out with a spreadsheet, that's what it looked like. Not super amazing. Gone to this initial version of the application where farmers could put in requests for water at different points in the district. You could see a list of the requests that have been made with different statuses, and a calendar, some rules. And then the modern or current version of the system, a little more refined. So here's details about a particular water order request. And I'm not going to go into any depth here, but there's a lot of options for the districts to customize what's displayed here, what information is recorded from a farmer, build reports, and get a lot more detail. Added some dashboarding capabilities, mapping, kind of come a long way from that initial spreadsheet. And then there were a lot of unexpected outcomes. So again, 6 years ago, I would not have imagined being here. But I've also, in that time, become a package maintainer. As I've developed things, it made sense to share that stuff with the community. So I've shared some of my own code with others, and then I've helped maintain or improve lots of other folks' package. Sometimes just as simple as improving the documentation in their packages. There's a million ways that we can help out the community. It's also enhanced the technical tool sets that I can take back to my work in the Marine Corps. But probably the most important unexpected outcome is that I've made a lot of really good friends. I was just last year talking about this journey with somebody, and they recommended, hey, that would make a decent talk. You should talk about that, which is what brings me here on the stage today. So some key takeaways. Python is very approachable. The community makes it that way, but the documentation, the resources out there, there's a million answers on Stack Overflow for Python related stuff. Embrace the mess. We all face struggles in our lives. You're trying to learn new things. Like, life is chaotic and hectic. Just embrace it. Do your best. Really stick with the community. Give back and enjoy the Python community, because there are so many brilliant people here, so many wonderful folks. And again, as I mentioned, the community seems to really care about some of the important stuff, bringing in folks who wouldn't necessarily be part of this community to make our community better. And your background is an asset. I just knew Excel. I'd done, dabbled in programming here and there, but those experiences kind of paved the way for me to build what I built. So I just want to leave you with this. If a U.S. Marine, an Excel nerd with ADHD who's juggling all sorts of stressors in life can stumble his way into building this, then imagine what you can build. Everyone in this room is capable of some amazing things. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you build. You don't have to wait to know everything to get started. Just find a problem that speaks to you and work on it. Embrace your journey and dive in. Thank you. Again, my name is Jack Linke. There's my information. And if you have any questions, I swear I'm approachable, so I would love to chat with you afterwards about any of these topics or anything else. Thank you again.